Back in the early 2000s, the street racing boom was in full swing. Games like Need for Speed Underground and Midnight Club were lighting up the PS2. And then there was RPM tuning. Released in 2004, it tried to ride the trend with customizable cars, a dramatic story and a taste of underground culture. But does it deliver a hidden gem, or is it just stuck in neutral? Well, that's what we're here to find out. Welcome to the Worst Racing Games, the series where you guys suggest different racing games that you think are terrible, and then I play them, review them, and rank them. And yes, today the sacred wheel of Worst Racing Games has chosen RPM tuning. So before we jump into the gameplay, let's just go over a bit of history about the game. So RPM tuning is also known as Top Gear RPM tuning, as it's part of the Top Gear game series, not to be confused with the television series of the same name.
Oh no! Anyway,
it also eventually saw a release on Windows under a completely different name. Midnight Outlaw 6 Hours to Sun Up, which is just ridiculous. But anyway, RPM tuning had a bit of a weird release timeline, as it first released on the PS2 in November of 2004, but only in Europe. It never saw a release outside of Europe on the PS2. Eventually, in February of 2005, America would get an Xbox port, and in June 2005, Europe would get an Xbox port. And then as well as this, the Windows version launched exclusively in North America on the 4th of March 2005. The game was developed by a French studio called Babylon Software, who to this day only have two different credits to their name, one of them being RPM tuning, and the other being Furious Karting for the original Xbox back in 2003. Most versions of RPM tuning were published by a French publisher called Wanna-Do Edition, but the North American Xbox release was published by Kemco, and the PC version was published by ValueSoft. Anyways, just for reference, the version of the game that you're seeing in this video today is the PlayStation 2 release. So right off the bat, RPM tuning doesn't really make the best first impression. Look at this horrible start menu. The image doesn't even stretch to the 4:3 aspect ratio. There's just a bit of the background around the start menu. It just looks so tacky. And yes, it continues this way. The menus are clunky, they're confusing, and they're just horribly designed. Navigation feels like it was slapped together at the last minute. Sometimes you're not even sure if your selection's registered until something finally loads. Once you actually press start, it looks even worse because you have this horrible bar that just covers up a bit of the image, but once again, it doesn't stretch across the whole screen, just the actual picture. It's just not a good first impression at all. So you've got a few different options before you jump properly into the game. You've got Quick Race, Adventure, and then Tune and Race. So the bulk of this video will be covering the Adventure mode, or basically the game's story mode, because I wouldn't say it's much of an adventure. So the game does feature a full story starring a man named Vince, who you'll be playing as. He is a street racer trying to climb to the top of the scene specifically so that he can find out who stole a car and where that car is. Now, it's not that deep, but on paper it's actually cool. Story-driven racing games were quite rare at the time, and giving players more than just win races by parts is a neat idea. But then the execution hits you. The translation is rough, sometimes hilarious, sometimes baffling. Subtitles don't even sync with the speech, and the voice acting is the kind of cringe that turns the game into unintentional comedy gold. If you love awkward cutscenes, you're in for a treat, because these characters are hilariously charismatic.
Elementary, baby, cause we ain't been officially introduced yet. My name's Mac.
My name is...
We're the same, you and me. I feel it, man. We're fighting for the same thing, bro. Dollar signs, baby. Flow, Skrilla bling. And that's cool.
Now, before we dive any deeper into RPM tuning, I just wanted to quickly mention that I have now launched a Patreon. By no means are you under any obligation to check this out, and I will always appreciate your support regardless, but if you want to get some behind the scenes content, early access to videos, and some other cool goodies, then check it out using the link in the description below. Anyway, now the stage has been set for the story. What is the game actually like? Well, in terms of controls, it's just fairly standard stuff. You've got two different control layouts, pretty much as standard for the PlayStation 2. and that's accelerating with X or accelerating with the right analog stick, and then braking with square or braking with the right analog stick. You steer with the left, look behind you with triangle, and you can use R1 to boost. Fairly straightforward controls, so what is it like? Well, once you hit the streets, the gameplay really does show its flaws. The car handling feels incredibly stiff, but also incredibly slippery, and just wrong. Now, there is an upgrade system that does affect your handling, and we will get into that later, but as a blanket statement for most of the game, the handling just doesn't feel right. But whilst the handling might not feel right to you, the player, it feels so much worse for the AI, because at least you can learn and adapt to it, but this AI will just crash and crash time and time again. Most of the time, they drive like they're half asleep. Other times, it will just rubber band you so hard, you feel like the race is scripted against you. There were just so many moments in the story that were just unintentionally hilarious because a character had told me in a cutscene before the race how good they are, how much better they are than me, and then within the first 10 seconds just crashed into a wall or into an oncoming car. And don't even get me started on the plot armor that some of these characters have throughout the story. The girl on the cover of the game, Carmen, genuinely is in like the most horrific crash I've seen in a long time, and she is completely unharmed. Totally ridiculous.
Carmen! Don't move. We're taking you home.
So, throughout your time with the story of RPM tuning, you will be able to play a few different event types. Not as many as we've seen in other racing games at the time, but still a few nonetheless. There are standard lap-based races, which will be between 2 to 4 laps. Then you have point-to-point races, which is just one long stretch of road, typically without any checkpoints in the middle, just the start and the end. There are a few time trials scattered throughout the story, and a couple of moments where you have to outrun the cops, but it's incredibly easy. I think the most time I spent doing a cop chase was probably about 20 seconds. And then, as well as this, there are multi-race championships. The championships are shown off in a way that you can score points no matter which place you come, but here's the kicker. In these championships, you can't just place consistently to win based on points. No, you have to win every single race. If you mess one up, you have to go back to the start. It's a really baffling design choice that kills any sense of progression or strategy in these championships. I mean, thankfully, the game is very easy, so it's not really a problem anyway, it just seems like a really stupid, lazy piece of design. Anyway, the word tuning is right there in the title, so you'd expect some deep customization, right? Well, sort of. The game does offer fairly in-depth options for both the exterior and interior of your car. Paint jobs, spoilers, body kits, and then nitro, different engine upgrades, different brake upgrades, so on and so forth. There is plenty there. And honestly, that's one of the game's biggest strengths. What I also like is that when you do add different body kits, it's not just a cosmetic. There is actually a performance boost, such as increased downforce, and you'll also get something called fame. The issue is the game doesn't really explain fame to you whatsoever, it just kind of starts telling you that you're getting it, but doesn't tell you what it actually does. Well, what it does is it creates a multiplier so you earn more cash at the end of each race, and for every bit of kit you install, every engine upgrade, there is a bit of fame to go with it, and you'll also earn this from winning races, performing overtakes, so on and so forth. It just doesn't tell you that. And that's really a problem with this game across the board. You're changing parts, you're spending money, but the results just aren't really clear. The game doesn't really feel the need to tell you anything. Why is it there? What does it do? Who knows? RPM tuning doesn't want to tell you. Now, in terms of its visuals, RPM tuning also struggles. The environments are frankly quite bland, the city feels empty, and even the car models lack the polish you'd expect, although at least they look kind of okay. But this is a game that has a heavy emphasis on nightlife and the street racing scene, and just the nightlife and the city at night just don't feel alive at all. It's just a boring backdrop that you'll be sliding around under poor handling. And sadly, the sound design doesn't really do it any favours either. The engines sound kind of flat, and the soundtrack just is generic rock and techno that wears out its welcome very quickly. Because when you're doing a race, it will just play a song at random, but then the song will just loop. It won't move on to another song in that race, it will just play the same one over and over again. Now I get that there weren't many songs to choose from to begin with, but just play all of them on a shuffle, I don't just need the same song on loop. Now to the game's credit, there is a certain charm in how bad it is. The poor dialogue, the broken subtitles, the over-the-top cutscenes, and just everything comes together into a big, cringy, hilarious mess. If you enjoy laughing at awkward PS2 era storytelling, you'll find plenty of it here. And I did find weirdly as I played through the game there was a kind of strange charm to it, even if everything was janky. Now let's look at RPM tuning through a critical lens. Let's see how it holds up in terms of its review scores. Well, on Metacritic there isn't actually a review score for the PS2 version, but the Xbox version of the game holds a generally unfavourable score of 45 out of 100, and doesn't have enough user ratings to even get a user score to begin with critics saying it's a half-competent game but just not one that could compete in the current market. It's a game that's worthy of a rental, but not actually buying. Which I can agree with to an extent, because there is fun to be had here, mostly from the laughable cutscenes, but with some decent customization, it does have that redeeming factor to it. Now, I took to VG charts to see if I could find any sales figures for the PS2 version of this game, but there aren't any available. If you were interested, apparently the Xbox version only sold about 20,000 units, which doesn't really surprise me. So then I thought I'd check price charting to see if the game was worth a lot because it was rarer, but if you want a complete copy with box and manual, it's worth about £4.80, so not very much. So now the time has come to rank RPM tuning, or Top Gear RPM tuning, on our tier list of worst racing games. Now, with those horrendous cutscenes and cringy dialogue, for me this game is just so bad that it's actually kinda good. Yes, I had a good time, but I didn't have a good time because the game is actually good, it's just broken and funny. At the end of the day, this game is just a fascinating mess. It tries to offer a cinematic story, deep customization, and competitive street racing, but pretty much stumbles in every area. Horrible menu design, unresponsive driving, inept AI, and confusing progression drag the whole thing down. The positives, well, as I say, the customization is surprisingly detailed, and just having a story, even if it's not great, in a racing game is always a fun idea. There's just no good execution. If you're a hardcore collector of obscure PS2 titles, RPM tuning might be worth a laugh. But if you're looking for a solid street racing experience, stick with those heavy hitters like Need for Speed Underground or Midnight Club. And so that takes us to the end of our look at RPM tuning, and with it this week's episode of Worst Racing Games. Where would you guys rank RPM tuning? Would you rank it differently? Do you like it? Do you not like it? Share all your experiences with the game in the comments down below. And as always, if you have any suggestions, let me know also. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, and if you haven't done so already, subscribe and tap the bell for notifications. And I just want to say a massive thank you to my Patreon subscribers. I will see you all in my next video. Bye bye.